Now the PlayStation 5 Pro is mere weeks away, and we all have our pre-orders in and felt the pain of that terrible page just not to get to the 30th anniversary edition. Brothers and sisters, shake our fist at PlayStation's poor decisions here. I mean, simply, they should have limited to X amount of years of PSN accounts only to ensure that only long-term players get the best chance of owning one and keeping them. Oh hum. Anyway, moaning aside, limited editions or not, no hardware is worth anything without stuff to play on it and what it offers. Now, I have a huge amount of stuff lined up to cover on the machine to test out just how it improves games with its new Boost Mode, or Boost Mode Pro, or Boost Pro it should be called, like a toothpaste or fuel injector. Then the latest SDK that landed early this year with developers and later this year with our system updates will enable the team to get patching with bigger updates that can add extra features, modes, effects, ray tracing and of course PSSR. Now check out my pre and post launch PlayStation 5 videos where I predicted the process, or well explained it actually, as it's kind of been my career for largely the past 4 decades, which will explain a great deal of how all of this works under the hood and behind the scenes. Now here though, I wanted to offer what I can at least, my view and examples of just what PSSR, the GPU power hike, the bandwidth, the memory increase, and yes, that CPU itself might add to the games. Now, I have access and have seen all of the ProRes 4K high quality B-roll footage, the PS5 Pro footage of all the games shown so far and some not. But I'm not allowed to show it in public due to the PR event guidelines themselves, which is fine, normal, and no problems from my perspective. What I will use though is footage shared on YouTube already by others to demonstrate my points and talk you through some of the things I noticed you can expect and where I can predict what we may see ahead. As mentioned on my prior video, the basic construction of games in the past 2 years has made clear developers knew of the PS5 Pro at least 18 months or so ago. Now, I knew 100% of its existence and that checkerboard 2.0 that I called it about 12 or so months ago, which I discussed in various places and videos. But many games have seen DRS and or unlocked or VRR modes. A prime example was Spider-Man 2, and I even mentioned it on my IGN review. The unlocked Fidelity 40 mode and the unlocked Performance 60 mode will be a perfect example of what the boost mode can deliver without a byte of code touched, although the team are working on updates for this particular game and others. Now, as covered in my reviews, the game can hit the mid-50s in its fidelity mode on base PS5 when staring at the sky, and around the mid-70s in combat on performance mode. So, depending on the areas it is most likely limited by, then the Pro version of that same code should leap up to the highest resolutions within that DRS range and or see a bump of around 35 to 40% in performance if GPU bound. E.g. that 43 FPS would now be just around or above 60 FPS with no change in code. That 70s during combat should now be into the high 90s. Again, this is all based on the engine and API being able to use the GPU and memory fully from the updated OS driver on the machine now. Now, taking another game that's heavily GPU bound in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the 120 FPS mode could dip more on PS5 than Series X, again in my reviews, unsurprisingly pointing to a GPU load and one that will benefit greatly from wider and faster GPU and more bandwidth. So here I expect the PS5 Pro to achieve that 120 FPS in far more scenarios over the single player and multiplayer versions, which would feel much better and again for free. Again, using my own stats from my very own PS5 Slim review where I compared both models and they were identical, I would expect the lows to now be into the high 80s, low 90s and averages into the 100 plus FPS. Certainly a boost you will see and feel without any VRR screen or frame rate graph required. It will be very interesting to see just how Blop 6 runs in its Pro version, which will almost certainly have a dedicated updated version that will likely lean heavier into ray tracing and other effects if Blop 6 still supports it.
We're taking out as many strategic targets from the air as possible.
Do it.
Now, not all problems can be remedied by a power hike, and we can see this in Final Fantasy XVI, as I noted in my patched review. The frame rate mode was fill rate and bandwidth bound, and now the PC version has come out, and this has been proven true with it struggling with resolutions and performance just like the PS5 did. And this actually changed the tune of many a Platform Warrior's comments on this particular game when it was PS5 exclusive, comically. But here, the 720 to 1080p DRS may be slightly higher. However, I still expect drops below 60 FPS, as the game would need far more changes, as I noted in that review, to resolve the dips here, which I suspect this will get an updated patch, and brings me to the next big benefit the Pro will offer, and likely its biggest, as I keep saying, the whole machine was built around.
So this one must be the exception.
Now this game will benefit greatly from using PSSR to boost the image quality and performance, even from a similar resolution base. And as I said in my PS5 Pro announcement video, this is the USP of the Pro that everything else is designed around. AI and machine learning images with TAA is better than pure brute force and can, at times, be significantly better. Now, the graphics and frame rate mode differed mostly in resolution, aside the significantly better shadows in that 30 FPS mode, which boosted character and world quality, but they still look great in both modes, with a few other small tweaks in ambient occlusion and textures. Now, in play though, the softer image and stable elements on alpha, trees and particle effects are what hurt the IQ most. Using PSSR from a fixed 1080p base back to 4K or even 1440p would drastically improve the quality of this mode, even if all of the settings remain the same. I would still expect the game to dip below 60 FPS running the base code boosted, as noted in my previous section, but here with a patch to better utilise the PS5 Pro's RDNA 3/4 custom GPU block, I could see that we could have slightly better performance and image quality that came close to the 4K graphics mode at 60 FPS. Using the PC version, I can demonstrate that with a pseudo PS5 Pro in my RX 6800 GPU, getting rid of that FSR spatial upscale that PS5 uses, and moving to FSR2 and then native 1440p, we can see the machine can still achieve a close enough range on 60 FPS, and this is with a Zen 3 5600X, which I have shown many times can actually perform better or worse than base PS5 depending on the title, and again with better image quality as demonstrated here. Now, with this being a PlayStation 5 exclusive and supported by Sony directly, I would expect any potential CPU impacts to be higher on PC here than PS5, and as such I expect the PS5 Pro would likely perform better than the pseudo Pro PC I'm using here. This is a great example of where PSSR would step in, but we actually have a real life example, and certainly in this case the best case example, in terms of what PSSR can do over a badly implemented version in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, this particular game had poor choices and implementation of Unreal Engine 4's TAA solution in both of its modes, and then added a nearest neighbour upscale pass to help sharpen the image, but actually makes the image more unstable and is a solution that's better suited to 2D art and retro style games than dense geometry foliage style 3D games. Here, what it does show though is many teams that use these off-the-peg methods can lead to poor image quality and decisions, leading to a collection of games in the past 2 years or so that have had bad IQ on PS5, Series X, Series S, and even PC at times. But with PSSR, with minimal amounts of work being available for all PS5 Pro developers to plug into, with the largely same inputs that any TAA or temporal reconstruction solution uses, such as motion vectors, color buffers, and then create far better outputs on screen. Now, by using the libs and the toolkits, this will present what we see here, with vastly superior image quality, clarity, and performance over the base PS5 version, and likely even FSR2 and such. Now, this game is a prime example of what PSSR can offer by taking the game that seems to have been impacted by possibly inexperience with the engine or the development team as a whole, something I've mentioned often in the past 3 or 4 years, where teams can struggle to optimize their games with performance and image quality targets in time for launch. Now we have a game that has vastly improved details, temporal stability, reduced ghosting, even over the 30 FPS PS5 graphics mode, and it's night and day over the same 60 FPS performance mode. And this will mean smaller teams can also use this and achieve far better quality and performance than just using the extra GPU power without this. Now, Final Fantasy VII is a best case or worst case scenario in just how drastic the leap up PSSR can deliver. Not all ghosting is gone, and some instability on foliage and such still remains, but fine details such as leaves on trees, hairpins, texture details, specular, and more is resolved with far more accuracy, and due to the temporal increase in data, this is also true of that 4K graphics mode, even though it looks to scale from around 1120p upwards to 1620p in action, with PSSR reconstructing it back to 4K as often as possible. Now, I do expect to be covering many titles in the next few months on PS5 Pro where we will see a huge leap up in image quality alone over the current PS5 Series X versions, and the comparisons to the industry-leading DLSS will be very interesting indeed. A Rift Apart is going to be a minor patch, I would suppose, as per Spider-Man 2. I expect PSSR to replace their own temporal injection with improved image quality and maybe RT quality to boot in the two modes, but the footage shown seems to indicate that the base is the performance RT settings with better quality of image rather than effects. Now, the fidelity mode had better level of detail and ray tracing over that mode, so I suspect these modes will also benefit from a big boost in performance in those 120 and VRR modes, and again refer to my first section of this video for my expectations. Now, Horizon Forbidden West is probably the odd one out. As per my website preview about a month or so ago, this is now confirmed to not be using PSSR, as I surmised. Instead, the near 50% raw GPU power hike has allowed Guerrilla to push that 40 FPS fidelity mode to 60 with better image quality and subsurface scattering. Now, in the limited shots, this is exactly what we see. Better image resolve, more detail in surface, helped by a higher temporal source due to the doubling of frame rates, and again, this will be another small patch with the team using this as a baseline for their upcoming Zero Dawn remaster using the same Forbidden West engine upgrades, which is being handled directly by Nixies but generally with support from Guerrilla also. So the art design, the models and lighting will all benefit. So expect little more outside of extra headroom for greater performance in, again, those unlocked modes. Now, the games demonstrated at the USPR event highlighted a selection of choices made. Demon's Souls was already a stunner, and again, I've seen the footage from that event. I can't show you it here, but like the base PS5's fidelity mode, here, PlayStation 5 Pro also runs at 4K via PSSR, but now targets 60 with superior image over the old 30 FPS fidelity mode. Now, part of the reason the game was so impressive at launch, and remains so 4 years later, is the engine's extensive and excellent geometry tessellation. Now, the public shots are very limited, but it does look slightly higher in places on some shot comparisons, and shadows are better. You can see here the improved self-shadowing on the knight's armour on his shoulder along the wall with increased texture detail, but some of that is late texture bitmap load on my PS5 here. Now, the game used screen space and shadow maps, but looks to have increased that on the Pro. Now, they may be screen spaced or ray traced, but still screen spaced. See, not all ray tracing is in world space, and I often see others confusing these two things, which in turn can confuse the audience. Ray tracing does nothing visually in and of itself. It is merely a means to an end. Tracing a ray can be used for anything, and often is. Collision, sound, pathfinding, light, shadow, reflections, GI. The ray and intersection resolve a query, and then that info is collated to perform some task. Now, screen space is a technique to reduce cost, like ray marching, binning of rays, early eviction, sub-rays per pixel, etc, etc. But I digress. From the footage I have seen, I cannot be certain if it is ray tracing or not, but the quality, filtering and accuracy, including possible geometry density increases via that excellent tessellation system, is or may be superior, like the image quality clearly is, and it's impressive for a launch day game, and maybe points to the fact they're working on a big game in the background with lots of sweat, blood and tears. Alan Wake 2 is another prime example to show off the PS5 Pro's ray tracing status, as it is an impressive but demanding ray tracing game on PC. And in fact, this was confirmed just as I finished editing this video. I've added this part over the top of the old one where I assumed this, and it's now actually been proven as fact. They have in fact released an excellent blog detailing all the work and specific engine code changes they have made to run the demanding ray trace reflections on a console for the first time. Recall, Control Enhanced ran both opaque and transparent reflections with Fresnel factored in, but here the materials, the scene complexity and amount of objects included and tracked per frame into that BVH data tree is far higher. Something they discuss in that blog, so please go check that out in the link below. But this now has all that high quality dynamic reflections and GI, along with improved shadows, light effects, and uses PSSR from a 1224 base back to 4K at 30 FPS. And then performance mode now has improved effects and also reconstructs to 4K now from the same 856p at 60 FPS, essentially running the previous PS5 quality settings at 60 using PSSR. And moving into another pseudo PS5 Pro comparison, or at least forecast, my RX 6800 5600X at the same PS5 performance mode settings at 4K FSR2 performance, so 1080p base resolution, it cannot fully lock to 60 FPS, but most of these seem to be code, CPU or driver related stutters and not direct GPU causes. Now I would expect PS5 Pro to be locked, or at least close to, in its new performance mode with improved settings. But moving to similar ray tracing levels as that new PS5 Pro mode, 4K FSR2 balanced and only low ray trace reflections on, no direct lighting or path tracing, it can dip below 30 FPS in large water bodies with lots of reflections, which means once we can go hands-on with final hardware and code, we can see if that gap continues or shrinks on another third-party multi-platform game using these same pain points. Now, I do not want to be drawn into which PC spec matches the PS5 Pro. As I say all the time, paper specs and PC and consoles are not the same or even easily transferable. See how PS5 and a selection of CPU and GPU specs can be better or worse game to game. Now, I would set expectations closer to a 5700X in the CPU area and a 7800 XT or 4070 Super level GPU in many games, and ray tracing I would expect it to be above any current AMD GPU on the market, specifically in first party titles. That I will give more answers on all of that very, very soon. And this will be a great one to benchmark in my full review, so stay tuned for that. Hogwarts ray tracing and GT7 round out the ray tracing upgrades with a wizardy boost to ray tracing shadows over the base PS5's RT reflections, which are also improved here. More rays are cast with a longer march into the world and improved flickering. See here in the ground where far more detail of the stained glass is reflected now, and it's more stable, with the base version losing a great deal of the frame between them and its colour, along with a rougher cutoff within the stochastic drop-off. Now this is likely going to increase the material reflection cutoff across more objects in the game, and therefore you're going to see more objects reflecting and reflecting objects further into the world. But overall, it's a minor boost but welcome nonetheless. GT7 really bumps up ray tracing up, with gameplay now getting the same high quality ray tracing of cars and world during races at 60 FPS, along with replays now being at 60 FPS again with ray tracing. In side-by-sides, the impressive accuracy of materials, self-reflections and bounce light and more is very good, if not transformative, but PSSR seems to support DRS, well at least here, with a slightly softer image than PS5's 4K mode. There are more stair-step edges and flicker on specular elements, and it does seem to scale from somewhere around 1120p up to around 1620p, then back up to that reconstructed 4K. Now, Dragon's Dogma 2 also highlights in ray tracing and potential CPU benefits in the brief section they showed off in the video, but I've already covered that in my separate video with all the patches applied. And remember, ray tracing impacts CPU bandwidth and GPU time, so on the PS5 Pro there might be far more going on here than just the improvements on the GPU and PSSR, and Dragon's Dogma 2 seems to point to that, but you can check out my previous video that I did earlier in the week. So we have discussed and demonstrated some real world and hypothetical results and increases those big three pillars of the PS5 Pro offer. A bigger GPU with more RAM and bandwidth, 2 to 3 times ray tracing improvements in certain areas, completed with hardware accelerated image reconstruction in PSSR, and what it can offer in those big leaps over current PlayStation 5 and Series X games, again closing up that gap to high-end PC. That can, money no object, still exceed the new console, but in my brief tests, the RX 6800 and Zen 3 5600X cannot match the small samples we have so far of the PlayStation 5 Pro. Dragon's Dogma 2 is over 32% faster in a close sample, showing that even CPU memory-bound games can benefit on the Pro, even with a supposed 10% CPU boost in clock speeds over the stock model. Ditto Alan Wake 2, maybe another one that highlights a gap against this PC spec or not. And with the team being PC focused first and foremost, this is certainly not a console centric title, but one of many that are showing how much the Pro can add to the current gaming stable, helped in no small part with the huge swathe of third party games being patched right now for improved Pro support. Stellar Blade, Rise of the Ronin, Helldivers 2, Jedi Survivor, Star Wars Outlaws, which particularly will benefit from this, Resident Evil 4 and Village, and even PSVR 2 games such as Kayak VR Mirage and No Man's Sky and GT7. Finally, the first party teams will always push harder and be able to optimize more for the fixed hardware here, so that Horizon Zero Dawn Remaster, Rift Apart, The Last of Us 2 and Demon's Souls could all raise those levels even higher when the games drop. The Pro will not transform all PS5 games from top to bottom, but it will expand, enhance and offer a choice. The best value proposition at a premium price for PS4 and PS5 games that could stand shoulder to shoulder in many areas with the best PC has to offer, and is likely a target growth area for the console's existence itself. Now, how successful and widespread that remains to be seen, but this winter could be very hot indeed, and I'm looking forward to covering it all in depth right here on my channel, my website, and of course over on IGN Performance Review. So be sure to sign up and subscribe to my channel, and obviously comment and share where appropriate, as all that helps me out with the pesky algorithm. And remember, I am self-funded and completely independent, and no matter what, I'll always give you the information, facts and figures so you can make up your own mind. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to tell you what the evidence proves. And hopefully I've done that yet again here with a look forward of the PS5 Pro, but you can obviously check how close I was when we all go hands on.